Okay, good morning to all of you joining us from Saint Vincent's, and good morning to all of you here in the room and joining us online. I'm very happy to be joined today by His Excellency the Prime Minister of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, and he's joined by the resident coordinator for the United Nations for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean countries and territories, Didier Trebucq. They are here to talk to you about the funding appeal launched today following the eruption of the Soufrière Volcano. They will both make some introductory remarks, and then we'll take your questions. So we'll start with Didier and then go on to the Prime Minister. Mr. Trebucq, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to join you with Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, with my colleagues from the UN here on the ground, first responders, PAHO, WFP, UNICEF, amongst others. So it's very important that we have a follow-up discussion today, since I joined you last week for a noon briefing where I described the preliminary impact and the needs. And because since then I had the opportunity to travel to St. Vincent from Barbados by boat, along with my colleagues. And Prime Minister took me 2 days ago to the orange and red zones that have been heavily affected by the ash falls and rumblings following the eruption of the in the northern part of the island. And you will see a video and very impactful images during this event today, this press conference. But I can really only describe the impact of the ashes that in some places reached the 10 to 15 inches, and the rumbling combined with rains over the past few days as really apocalyptic. I really want to use this word, apocalyptic and desolate. We have seen many roofs that have collapsed. The roads have been turned into tracks. For example, the school in Sandy Bay has no more roof. And this is due again to the accumulation of the ashes. St. Vincent is very reliant on agriculture. The crops are all devastated in this part of the island. Animal husbandry have been affected, of course, very, very heavily. And this is going to have a critical impact on the economic sector, of course, of the island, needless to talk about the tourism. So what I want to say is that the devastating impact of this event on thousands of people is really undeniable. And following this visit, I can only say that those images will really stay engraved in my memory for many, many years. What we have assessed is that the humanitarian needs are very critical for immediately, specifically 15,000 people that have been displaced, around 15% of the population, and those people have been evacuated for the northern areas of the island, which has higher indices of poverty, hence greater degree of vulnerability. But overall, this is really the vast majority of the population of the island that has been affected, as the people also hosting the evacuees are now put under stress, I would say, and socioeconomic stress, and under vulnerability similarly. So we have currently around 6,200 people registered in shelters, and around 6,500 people registered displaced in private homes. So this is really a situation that is going to be not really sustainable following several weeks, even though the humanitarian assistance is flowing satisfactorily at this moment. And that is why we are today launching this funding appeal, because urgent need is required to scale up and sustain this assistance, again, because the vast majority of the people in this island has been affected. The health facility as well have been affected. 2 out of the 5 hospitals had to be evacuated. Hence, this is really putting even more pressure on the remaining health system. And there is still a lot of uncertainty. I mentioned to you the other day that we're dealing with a very complex situation. eruptions continuing. We felt a tremor this morning. 2 days ago, we could see another eruption. So it's very clear that this uncertainty will result in many months and probably over a year to recover. The task for the ashes cleanup is enormous. What you will see in the images will speak for itself. The logistics will be a huge challenge, as there are some areas where also most likely people may not be able to return. So there is the whole issue of settlement, resettling people, repairing homes, repairing community infrastructure, and Prime Minister will talk about that. What I want to say also is that we have also seen a great deal of solidarity, social solidarity, here in Saint Vincent, but also regionally with neighboring countries, and resilience amongst the local community, especially with people managing themselves the shelters, or with families and friends hosting many evacuees, as I have just mentioned. People of Saint Vincent are incredibly resilient, incredibly courageous in the way they are going through their situation. I also witnessed the wide effort deployed by the government and the people, and I'm also, I would say today, full of hope that we can overcome the situation. But the country needs help, and Prime Minister will also talk about that. And I'm also hopeful because there were no deaths so far in the way the evacuation was handled in a very timely manner. So what we're seeing that is being delivering is very encouraging, but that's not enough, and that's why Prime Minister Gonsalves requested the UN to further deploy, to upscale its assistance. Currently, we have mobilized humanitarian interventions with the agencies I have mentioned, WFP, UNICEF, PAHO being first responders. We have currently allocated close to $2 million for this response in critical areas such as water, hygiene, cash vouchers to provide food and basic necessities with WFP support. The United Nations Environment Programme is deploying a team of experts to collaborate with the government here to assess the government to support the cleanup and disposal of the ashes, but also to look at specifically the environmental health related to this situation. PAHO WHO also donated many health equipment and PPEs. But much more is needed. Much more is needed immediately, but much more also is needed to prepare for the recovery and the resettlement of the families. So basically, this UN global funding appeal that we're launching today intends to mobilize the solidarity from the international community for a response that will cover some of the needs, some of the gaps only for the next 6 months. So we are launching today a US $29.2 million global funding appeal. This is an effort to protect the most vulnerable people that have been displaced, all the affected people by this crisis in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, and also the effect that this crisis is having in other neighboring countries. So the objective is really to scale up the humanitarian assistance and to initiate as soon as possible the recovery. The interventions and the funding appeal document is available to you is divided among 8 sectors. Provide access as quickly as possible in the most sustainable manner to water and hygiene and sanitation, 1. 2, continue to provide access to food through different modalities, kits or cash vouchers through the government mechanisms that is in place, as well as supporting the livelihood of the families over the medium term. 3, the shelter. Many people are in shelters. We need to look at the essential needs over the next few weeks and months, but also looking at the housing, transition to housing and long-term needs, such as repair of houses, community infrastructure, or resettlement of families. So those 3 first areas, water, food, and shelter, are definitely one of the top immediate priorities. We also have to look at the support to the delivery of the education system so that it's not being disrupted. I would like to recall that many of the evacuees are sheltered in schools, so we need to look at this issue, of course, very specifically. Then 5, the need to strengthen the health services to prevent further spread of COVID and, of course, address environmental health concern with the ashes. 6, a very important area relates to the cleanup of the ashes across the island, including with equipment and expertise. The seventh area that we have proposed into this appeal is related to the protection of the most vulnerable, who are currently in precarious condition, but who may not be able to return immediately. So this is about really preventing gender-based violence, ensuring child protections, amongst others. And finally, logistics. There is an immense logistical challenge for the delivery of the aid currently, especially people who are still in the orange zones and difficulty of access, but also for the repairs, for the cleanup. So it is our intention today with Prime Minister Gonsalves to make a call for action. As I said last week, we are dealing with a crisis within the COVID crisis, and we fear the risk of spike of COVID cases with people in shelter. This is a very complex situation. There could be more eruptions. The situation can deteriorate very rapidly. The hurricane season is about to start in 6 weeks, and it has already been predicted to be above average. So we need to avoid a multiple crisis scenario. Greater international support is needed. This will allow for us to rapidly scale up, as I said, and support the government to respond to this growing humanitarian crisis that is unfolding before our eyes. So we have no time to lose. And along with my colleagues from the UN team, from Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, I really make, alongside Prime Minister Gonsalves, an urgent appeal to ramp up solidarity, to support Saint Vincent and the Grenadines and other neighboring affected countries, and really call for an immediate contribution to this UN global funding appeal. Thank you.
Excellency Ralph Gonsalves, the Prime Minister of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. Sir, please.
Over to you,
over to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, and I want to welcome the journalists on the UN Watch. We are very happy to have you here at the launch of this Global Appeal Fund for St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a consequence of the disaster caused by the volcanic eruptions. A series of them since the 9th of April, 12 days ago. Just a little backdrop so that you could see the predicament in which we find ourselves. Last year, the first 3 months, 2020, we had a good 3 months. Good tourism season, good revenues in the last 3 months, both in the economy and for the central government. And then the COVID pandemic hit. And though we didn't close our borders, the world closed down on us. And then for the rest of the year, the economy went down. Not as bad as in some other areas, even in our region, but the World Bank estimated that our economy would have contracted last year. Output would have contracted by just under 5%, which is a big number. And we are holding our own with the COVID. And then we get this terrific blow from the volcanic eruption. And that sent matters further in a tailspin. We had to evacuate close to 1/5 of the population of the island of St. Vincent, which is the main island in the chain of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the northern 1/3 of the country, which is good agricultural country, good animal husbandry country, good fishing country, and growing tourism spots, it's all gone. It's the ash, the volcanic activity, it's now a relative wasteland. It's desolation that we have to do a lot to recover. In the meantime, we have to feed persons in the shelters and in homes. You're talking about registered in excess of 12,000 persons, both in shelters and in homes. It's a huge number. Look, the lives and livelihoods of our people have been terribly affected. we are in a situation, we are in a dire situation, frankly. The UN system has indeed, the global community has expressed great interest to us, and I want to thank my friend, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who has taken a personal interest in this and is leading from the front. And that's why we see it's all the UN forces agencies are deployed there, and we have this appeal, which the government of Saint Vincent and Grenadines supports very strongly. We endorse it. We need a lot of money for social protection, for feeding people. We need, and we have to do this for a long time. We had problems with water. The problems are not solved yet, though it has gotten a little better. But it's fragile because the ash can come again with any more eruptions. And we are not out of the woods. The scientists say that we may be 6 months, 7 months. The last time there was an eruption in 1979, 42 years ago. It lasted a good 7 months. In 1902, and this eruption looks more like the 1902 one, lasted longer. And we have to deal with livelihoods during that period. Even when we clean up all the ash and we go back, it's going to take several months for the crops to grow. And there are a lot of trees which are going to take longer. Coconut trees, breadfruit trees, fruit trees, and the like. Things like bananas, plantains. Bananas take 9 months to bear fruit. So you can see the length of time which is ahead of us when 1/3 of your country is in desolation, 1/3 of the island, and then nearly 1/5 of the population evacuated. There are health challenges, public health challenges, in addition to COVID. And you must remember this, that this is a country with a reasonable level of human development. The Human Development Index of the UNDP put us in the upper middle category. So people who live reasonably, even though we have areas of poverty, and the northern 1/3 are the areas where you have most of the poor in the country. Still, people who have been living reasonably sophisticated lives, and in a country which is a functioning parliamentary democracy, modern telecommunication system, everybody has a cell phone. In fact, you have more cell phones in the country than people, because some have more than one. A lot of people have more than one. And as you yourself know, at the UN General Assembly had a tremendous respect for us, for our work, which we have been doing in the UN system. And we were elected by the General Assembly overwhelmingly in June 2019 to serve 2 years as a non-permanent member in the Security Council. And I believe some of you were there the day when we got elected and asked me outside of the chamber. I see you shaking your head because you have on the mask. I'm seeing you in front of me. I think you asked me a few questions. Yes. The man from Al Jazeera. Am I correct? You see? I remember my man. We have all these challenges coming to us from outside. And we just, as a small island developing state and with limited resources, we don't have the money and all the technical skills to address these multiple issues. And as Didier says, the hurricane season is just 6 weeks away. And you know, it's a bad time to be having all these kinds of problems and challenges. On the good side, we are a very resilient people. We have a hardworking population. People don't want to be relocated overseas. Small numbers would want to go and visit their friends and family for short periods of time. But people want to stay and rebuild their country. There's a strong social solidarity, families, friends taking other members of family and friends, strangers taking people. The Caribbean family has been very supportive. The governments, CARICOM, the OECS, Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Regional Security System, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, the ALBA, the Association of Caribbean States, and of course governments around the world. We have been in touch very much with the British, with the Europeans. I've written to President Biden, to Vice President Kamala Harris. We have been in touch with governments in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, all our friends, all over the world. And we have received intimations of support. And I'm hoping that these intimations turn into substantial support, because without the help, we can't build back. We have the social solidarity and the institutional arrangements on the ground to build back stronger, but we need good technical support and good resources. The immediate humanitarian problem, humanitarian relief is critical, and we are working on these things. Just think of feeding on a daily basis 3 meals over 10, 12,000 people. It's a Herculean task for any government to be involved in doing that. And given the size of the overall population here and our resources, then children in the schooling they've been disrupted. Most of the shelters are schools, primary and secondary schools. The exam season is coming on. It is true that we have gotten devices for persons to do distance learning in schools, but it's an awesome challenge facing us without resources, and we really need help. As I put it yesterday at the United Nations Security Council, this is the midnight hour of our need. And we're expecting the international community to come to our aid. And I'm hoping that that expectation is embraced by the rest of the global community. I think that's in a nutshell what the story is. And we are asking you members of the media, the journalists, to carry the story far and wide, and encourage governments and non-governmental organizations and individuals to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
$29.2 million to be raised to the UN system. This is without prejudice to any other forms of assistance. It is something which we consider reasonable to be done and which would help us. Doesn't go the full way, but help us at least immediately.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, Didier, for those very vivid descriptions. We'll start with the man from Al Jazeera, James Bays.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Our thoughts clearly are with the people of your country at this difficult time. In terms of the timeline, you say the scientists aren't really telling you very clearly how much longer there will be a danger. How much longer do you think what's the whole timeline for rebuilding, and how are you going to cope over this period? And if I may, as you've said, you sit on the UN Security Council. You're known as the A3+1 because you work so closely with the African Union Group. As you're aware, the president of Chad has died of his injuries. I know you've been preoccupied with what's happening in your country, but clearly a very serious situation in Chad. What is your view on that, and do you think the Security Council should now meet to discuss it?
No. First of all, the scientists don't think that we're going to be out of the woods from the standpoint of the actual volcano erupting for at least 4 months. And then, of course, you can't just go back, because the cleaning to be done, my brother James, it's tremendous, and we have to rebuild houses and the road infrastructure and so on and so forth. So we have a long period, and then to bring back agriculture and animal husbandry, it takes time. You just can't. Bananas take 9 months to ripe. To come to fruition, so you can reap them and eat them. Sweet potatoes, 4 months. So you have to plant them, and then they have to give them that time. And in all that time, you have to give, you have to be providing supports. Otherwise, people are not going to be able to eat properly, and you have to shelter them and so on and so on. Educate their children, providing health facilities, and at this time of COVID, real problematic. So that's why I make the point very clear to you. On our own, we are not going to be able to address these multiple challenges. That's why we require the support. But once we get the support, we're going to do it because we have a strong social solidarity. Of course, if you don't have the strong social solidarity, you can put in as much money and technical help as you want. It still won't be done properly. But the social solidarity, or people understand what is happening, and we have institutions which are democratic and administrative institutions which are fairly well developed. Now, so that is the way I would answer the first part. In relation to the matter on Chad, I haven't been advised yet by the officials in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also at the my team at the United Nations. But as you know, James, the UN Security Council deals with 60% of the conflicts which are addressed at the Security Council are addressed African-related issues. The first thing that I'd like to find out is what is the position of the African Union, and certainly of the A3 at the Security Council, before I would answer you as to whether the United Nations, the Security Council, should become seized of the issue. Because yesterday, we had a big session at an open debate with Vietnam sponsored, where we discussed precisely the issue of enhancing cooperation between the United Nations and the regional institutions, regional organizations in conflict areas. And this is a case where the UN and the African Union, the Peace Building Commission, all the mechanisms have to come into play before we can make a precipitous decision as to whether the Security Council should become immediately seized of it. But clearly, all reflections would come through these institutions which are already established. I think that's fair enough, James.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Philippe Rater, Agence France Presse, AFP.
Thank you. Thank you for this briefing. My question is for Mr. Trebucq. Last time we met, you talked about the impact, the possible impact of the crisis on other islands. Can you give us an update about what's happening on the other island? And also, if you can precise that the almost 30 million you are looking for, it's only for Saint Vincent, or it's also for other islands in the region? Thank you.
Yes, well, we have received similarly a request for support and assistance from Barbados. Barbados is one island that has been heavily affected by the ash fall. And remember, last time we spoke, I was based in Barbados, so I lived it. And we're going to support, for example, Barbados with an assessment of those needs and losses. And similarly, we're deploying a team of experts with the UN Environment Programme to advise on the cleanup of the ashes, on environmental health issues and disposal of the ashes with a multidisciplinary team. Now, of course, there are others, such as St. Lucia and Grenada, which have been partially also affected by the ash falls. And remember that there are some of the evacuees who have expressed their wish to go to some of the islands because they have family members and friends. So this could be a situation where several displaced people will be dispatched as well in several islands. So I confirm that this appeal, of course, is heavily focused in Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, and I have mentioned the various sectors, but it's also including support that we provide and that has been requested by those other Eastern Caribbean islands. And, this is a first appeal. You may imagine that with around $30 million, we're not going to cover all the needs. It's really to fill the gaps for a first period of 6 months, and the situation will evolve. And then it depends also on where the evacuees are going and if there are also additional eruptions, as Prime Minister said. Over.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the remote journalist, Jennifer Peltz, Associated Press.
Thank you very much. This is a question for the Prime Minister. I just wanted to ask if you have initial estimates of the damage. I know you made reference to the World Bank numbers, but if I'm not mistaken, those are to do with assets at risk. Is that the same as the actual damage, or is there a different figure we might use?
No, there'd be a different figure, but the number is going to run into many millions of dollars, and we are not talking about just tens of millions. It's going to be in excess of that, because I've been in this business long enough to give numbers what we may have in respect of the actual damage, because we haven't done all of that assessed as yet, and the consequential economic loss and the amount of money for social support and protection, safety net, water, health, and so on and so forth. Housing, which is an important area. But when that number comes, we will know this appeal is really to address immediate humanitarian needs and to address preliminarily some matters, cleaning up, and to help the farmers and those involved in animal husbandry to see if we can get them some initial things to get them back on their feet. This is without prejudice to any other funding which we are going through with the other governments bilaterally, with the World Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the like. The humanitarian relief for the prolonged period is going to be huge. The cost is massive, no question about that, before we reach reconstruction, which would run from what I have seen and what is required to be done would be hundreds of millions of dollars.
Thank you. Toby Burns, NHK Japanese Television. Toby?
Thanks, Stefan. Thank you very much for this briefing. I wanted to ask Mr. Trebucq quickly, did you say that there was a video with images?
Yeah.
It sounds like the ash is really the main issue here, and being able to see that, I think, would be, for people to be able to visualize it, it's very helpful to, to give us a sense of the impact. And I have a question to go along with that, which is, what does it actually take to clean up this amount of ash? Do you need earth movers? How does it actually work? Because it sounds like that's probably the first thing that needs to happen.
Yes, thank you. Regarding the first part of your question, I'll defer to Stefan to decide when the video can be shown, so you will see with your own eyes what we saw on Sunday. This was should be two days ago when we visited the red zone and the orange zone with Prime Minister. So that will give you a very, very precise idea of the desolation and desperation that we have seen there. Now, in terms of the cleanup, it's very difficult to say exactly at this stage how that would be done, because this is massive. When you have in several places, if I talk metrics, 1 meter or half a meter of ashes, damaging the infrastructure, the roofs, the buildings, the crops, agricultural farming, obviously it is not going to be resolved in a few weeks. So that's why we have the team of 12 experts that are arriving between today and the next few days to work with the government to assess exactly what it will take to clean up the ashes, to dispose those ashes, what will be the ecological impact that this will have, what will be the contamination on, simply things like water, biodiversity, and how will it have to be addressed in terms of the cleanup and the disposal in terms of equipment, machinery, human efforts. Then there are ways also to engage beneficiaries through cash for work mechanisms, so we can contribute to some livelihood for those people who are currently in shelter, so that they can contribute as well to rebuilding and clean up this area. So this mission will take around 3 weeks, and I'm sure that within 1 to 2 weeks we'll have already additional clarity on how this can be addressed by working with authorities here.
May I just give my brother, who has a very important question about the ash?
Yes, please, go ahead, please.
It is estimated by the scientists that thus far we have had an emission of ash amounting to in excess of 100 million cubic meters of ash. There was a dome from 1979 eruption, which was about 70 million cubic meters of ash, of material. And then the dome, which was built up this year through the effusive eruption before the explosive one, at about 15 million. Then they estimate what has come out thus far, new material since the explosion, of over 20 million cubic meters of ash. That's over 100 million. But they estimate that you have more new material remaining than came out in 1979. And what came out in 1979 was 60 million cubic meters. So you have at least another 40 million cubic meters to come out. It is true that not all of this ash came on the island. That some went to sea and some went to Barbados and to other places. If you see a tracking, this ash has reached all the way now to India, because of the height it went. You probably have seen it from the Seismic Research Center based in Trinidad at the University of the West Indies. And they're the scientists who are here on the ground with us. So that you take an infrastructure like the international airport. It was closed on the 9th of April, the first explosion. But it's still closed. We're still cleaning it up. Because you clean, ash comes back. It's a lot of ash to clean. And the crops, well, coconut trees. I don't know if you know breadfruit trees, the fruit trees. The weight of the ash has broken leaves, branches, broken trees. And for the trees like bananas and plantains and the ground provisions, they're all gone, they're covered with ash. You have to dig those out and replant again. So, and while you're doing all of that, you have to feed 15% of the island on a daily basis, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. and to organize for their education and their health. Imagine in the United States of America going to have to deal with 15% out of 330 million people. And that's a country with a lot of resources. Imagine, and for listeners in other parts of the world, Egypt is 100 million people. Imagine having to feed 15 to 20 million people 3 meals per day and to house them and take care of them. That's just those who have been evacuated. You're not talking about other people who are requiring social supports and the like. It is an extraordinary existential challenge which is facing us. And that's why I need your help, brother, to say to your readers, to say to your listeners, look, you got to help, because these people, they have built themselves up and they deal with the public health system. They didn't bring COVID there. COVID came to meet us. The volcano is there. We have had problems with global warming. Our emissions are minimal. Basically, we are talking about the world standing up to help island civilizations. Unless, of course, the world decides that island civilizations are not worth saving. And you have, what about 40 or 50 small islands, states across the world? That's the story in a nutshell. And that's what faces us, my brother.
Mr. Prime Minister, Excellency, thank you very, very much. And I think I speak for all of us at the UN, you can count on our continued support and solidarity. And we hope to hear back from you in not too long to see how progress is going. The video, we cannot show it, but it is we will share it with the journalists right away. It is also available on Unifeed for all broadcasters to use, and it'll be on the web TV platform very shortly. And we will push it out. We just can't show it from this platform right now. Didier, thank you. Prime Minister, again, thank you. And the other person on the screen, for those who are wondering, is Reggie Chapman, the World Food Programme representative. And I know there are other UN agencies represented in the room. So thank you all, and take care and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.